Welcome to the Bladtcast. As always, I am Christian Bladt. This is the Bladtcast. Our pal David Brody should be joining us momentarily, but right here at the start of the show, making his triumphant return
Hello.
back to the Bladtcast, the one, the only, Ryan Nilsen. Ryan, how are you, sir?
It's so good to be here, Christian. I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing great. I was telling you before we started, we took the kids to the pumpkin farm about 40 miles north of LA,
Oh,
and
wow.
we had a fun-filled afternoon. Pumpkins were procured, but when you live in Southern California, the carving can't happen until like the day before Halloween because it's
Oh my
so
God.
hot. You
That's
know,
lovely. It's a nice
yeah,
little fall day.
yeah,
And then
but
what better way
yeah,
to cap it off talking
right,
about
exactly. Getting a chance to talk about Ahsoka. And when I knew this show was going to happen, there was really only one person that I wanted to talk to about it. And it's you, because I have met other people that are well versed in the Star Wars animated series, specifically Clone Wars and Rebels. Because look, I could talk all day about droids and Ewoks from 1985, but there's only, let's see, 26 episodes of Ewoks and 13 of droids in the TV movie, so
right.
it's a little easier to rein that in. And uh, everything that I saw in Clone Wars and Rebels I liked very much, but for the younger among you, including yourself, it might be hard to imagine. It was really hard to follow when it was going to be on when it first started on Cartoon Network.
Right.
I didn't have a DVR at the time. I had
Oh
to
man.
set my VCR. I had to know that it was back. And I didn't always know that the show was back. And so I would catch bunches of episodes, and then, it would go away for a little while, and I was like, "Oh man, I miss it." And
Yes.
a drama show that I liked very much that I had the same problem with was the Dennis Leary show Rescue Me. I really
Hmm.
liked that show.
Hard to DVR back in the day.
When you had a VCR and you didn't have a DVR, you had to know that shows were on. And when I was a kid, my mom would subscribe to TV Guide. Oh, and I would look through that thing every week. But I was an adult. I was in my 20s. I was living in Los
Right.
Angeles. I didn't have the TV Guide, and so I didn't know. Now I would definitely know. So what I saw, I liked. I saw the Clone Wars movie in the theater before the series premiered.
Yes.
I loved it. I thought it was great. I
Same.
was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
this is going to be fun." But I didn't keep up. You, on the other hand, you kept up
I
on
kept
all of
up.
it. You love all of it. And I think I once said, "All right, well, what are the episodes that I should really
Right.
watch that are most important?" And you're like, "All right, these like 80 episodes." I was like, "Ryan, that was too many."
A little too many. Well, I remember you and I were on a show for when we talked Mandalorian,
Yeah,
and that's when the talk of Ahsoka even began. Like the
yeah,
chance, oh, is this possible
right.
that
So
it
it
could be
was
coming live
season
action?
one. It was season one of Mandalorian we did for AfterBuzz with our pals Zia Anderson and Steph Sabra.
Right.
As you would say, that was an all-star panel, wasn't it?
All-star panel. It was such a fun time, and
Yeah.
I think my Clone Wars fandom was showing when we were talking about that. And then even fast forward to today, where now Ahsoka's been live action for 2 or 3 years now, and is a bit of a more popular character, and having her own series in live
Yeah.
action. I'm rocking the shirt. I'm rocking the
Nice.
sweatshirt. Got this at celebration of the year. But I'm excited to talk about this because I think I do remember talking about Ahsoka with you then, and so much has happened since with that
Yeah.
character to get to this series.
Yeah, and I think that, I saw a stretch. She wasn't a one of the leads on Rebels, especially not when it started, but I remember seeing episodes with her.
Right.
And but so her story continued there. But yeah, so when she shows up on Mandalorian, I was like, wow. I When we did the season one of Mandalorian, I wasn't convinced yet. And I should have known because I obviously Dave Filoni's involvement. I wasn't convinced in that first season that we were going to get the animated characters. And I don't know if we got anybody. I don't even think we got. No, we got Bo-Katan by the end of season one, right? Or was
We
that
did.
season
Well,
two?
no, that was season two. A lot of that was
Okay, so
season
that's
two.
the yeah, that's why it all started to happen after we did that season, you know. And because you had wanted Cad Bane to show up in season one. I remember you were like, there was a character you're like, that's definitely Cad Bane, and I think it was Ming-Na Wen instead.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
just to real quick, I'm Ryan. I've been on these shows with Christian before. I love your channel. This is the best.
Thank you.
I work in post. I used to work at a talk show network, but now I'm in post production for the past couple of years, and even work at on a show right now with Disney. But um, I know how hard it is to make these shows, and it's a journey. And I'm a massive Star Wars fan, and I'm excited to break down this show with you. But I do think what you were getting into there is important, the context of all that's come before this
Yep.
show. There's been so much, and I feel like so much of the dialogue going into this show was have you seen Rebels? Will people who haven't seen Rebels be able to follow this or not? And is it going to be made in a way that's palatable for anyone? Is it going to be made for people that just see Mandalorian? There are a lot of questions going in, and I know you've seen a bunch of this stuff, or did you watch all of Rebels? Did you watch all
No,
of
I
Clone
hadn't
Wars?
seen all of it. I had seen some. I was a huge fan of the Timothy Zahn Heir to the Empire novels. So when I knew enough that I knew Thrawn was going to be on, so I made sure to catch that. I think that obviously those novels are, what do they call them? Extended universe now or something. They're not
Yeah,
canon anymore.
Legends. Yeah.
But the character is consistent with the way he was in the novels. So I think that's the important thing. That so getting to see him animated, but now in this show to see him live action, I was like, all right, I never thought we were going to get that, because it's hard to imagine. But when you're an old man like me, those Star Wars novels come out in 1991. And by the end of the year, the Dark Horse Dark Empire series started, Dark Horse comic book series. I think we were fairly convinced that we were never going to get any more Star Wars stories the rest of our life. And then those books came out, and then those comics came out, and they were legitimately really good stories, and we were so excited. And then we got the prequels and the sequel trilogy, and all this. But so though I was 14, 15 when those books came out, so they're very important to me. So I kept up enough that I knew that, but I didn't even see the finale of Rebels. I know for a fact I had not seen it. And I decided I was waiting for Ahsoka to end before I went and saw it, because I was feeling not lost during the show. You know what I mean? Watching
We're getting
Ahsoka.
right into it. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew enough. And I have a friend who hadn't seen any of the animated shows, and he texted me. He was so angry in the one with the flashbacks to the Clone Wars series because he didn't have the context. And also he thought that he's like, the Space Wells is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. I'm like, well, clearly you haven't kept up on some of the Paramount Plus Star Trek shows, because it's not even close. But and so I use that friend as an example, because people can feel lost watching this series if they didn't have at least some degree of background. We did a special over on the Geekscape network. We did a special for Ahsoka there with a few people. Jonathan, who runs the network, he was closer to me, where he'd seen some of it and he felt like it helped. And I think having absolutely no knowledge of the animated shows is definitely a disservice. And I want to bring in our other talking head, our pal David Brody. David, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. I'm sorry that my entire computer system decided to update when I tried to sign on. So I made it.
I feel like the dark side was inhibiting your computer. That's Ryan. Ryan, this is
Pleasure
David.
to meet you, David.
Hey, Ryan.
We were just sort of talking about heading into Ahsoka, and some familiarity with the animated series helps, but you don't have to know the inside and out the way Ryan does. And David, I actually don't know where you were. Had you watched every episode of all the animated series, or somewhere in between?
Well, it's funny that I popped on just at this moment, because that was going to be one of the first things I wanted to talk about, in that I didn't watch any of the animation. I'm a big Star Wars fan, but I'm a live action fan.
Yeah.
At least, I haven't gone back. I may love the cartoons. I just haven't watched them yet. And so I had to watch a couple of YouTube videos to catch up, to figure out the relationship with Sabine. And then I find out that Sabine didn't train with Ahsoka. And, there's this, it's basically all this new canon that, if you watch the movies, didn't exist. And then they tried to retrofit it in and make like she trained with Anakin. And, it all makes sense. But I had to do some research to figure all that out. so I could enjoy episode 1. And then I had to go back and watch more videos because I had questions after episode 1. And I think it wasn't until episode 3 or 4 where I felt like I understood Rebels and, enough to get all the references.
See, if only I'd known, I could have texted you Ryan's number and you could have just asked him all your questions.
I should have done
And
that.
here's going to be a blast from the past for you, Ryan. Ivan Soto
Oh my
in
god.
the chat saying this is Rebels season 5 for sure. Honestly, does it feel like that to you, Ryan? Someone who was, obviously it does continue those threads. Did it feel like that, or was it different enough where you're like, no, it's Ahsoka, but it's clearly part of the shared universe, as it were?
I think that's a great question. I think again, leading into this show, that was what a lot of Star Wars fans were wondering: where is this just going to be Rebel season 5, but live action, or how are they going to do this? Because I think there's a world in which you can satisfy everyone, and if you provide the necessary like flashbacks or previously on or some kind of lead in, similar to what they did with that Obi-Wan show, kind of recapping the prequel
Sure.
trilogy. Maybe you get everyone up to speed, and then everyone kind of feels on the same page going on this show. And again, like I'm probably going to be throughout this show, I'm probably going to be a little critical. And like we'll talk about what I loved and what I was a little disappointed with. But again, I know it's hard to make these shows. It's a journey, and there's a lot of amazing work. But I think like all this is there's some constructive criticism along the way. At the end of the day, I'm in for what comes next after this. But when it comes to the question of does this feel like Rebel season 5, I think one of the biggest questions I had with this show, where I just was left a little baffled, was with the decision to where they started this series, because it was as if they made the choice to start the series where they did, to have everyone on an equal playing field of like, oh, a lot of stuff has happened since the Rebels show off screen. And for people who are just, being introduced to these characters, they also missed what happened off screen. So
Right.
that's going to put everyone in the same playing field, when I actually think it had the opposite effect. I think it kind of it was an awkward place to start, where a lot happened off screen. So the people who came in who had seen all of Rebels are like, what? There's a lot of, I guess Ahsoka already tried being a master to Sabine, and that just didn't work out, but it's been 5 years. It's something along those lines, and now they're trying again. And so in that way, like, it had all the characters from Rebels, and they're definitely finishing a storyline from Rebels, but it almost felt like if you're going to go that route, this is Rebel season 6, and we missed 5. Like everyone missed 5.
That was literally what I was about to ask you. Was it more like that? And there will definitely be shows that shows that I like very much that do time jumps, and you're like, oh, okay, so they just decided that some other stuff happened, and we have to play catch up. But I guess it helps that stuff happened off screen, because then that means that everybody is at least missing some of the information. So, and then also, of course, you should also know our pal Daniel Drew, who says hi to Ryan. Of course, all these old friends. There was definitely some excitement in my DMs when I announced that I was going to be doing a show with Ryan. They love David Brody too, but they just
sweet.
saw you.
It's okay. I love Ryan too, and I just met him. So
David Brody's a legend in my book.
Well,
so.
he's also true.
He's not only from Delaware, but he's a Phillies and an Eagles fan. But we don't have time for that on this show.
Oh well, congrats on the Phillies and go Jets today. So.
Oh, see, I told him I was wondering about that.
He's got a little up, a little down.
I'm in a bit of a cranky mood today. It's
because
because they lost to the Jets for the first time in franchise history.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, but anyway, it's if only I'd been in Vegas this weekend. The odds on the Eagles and the
Browns
losing. Yeah, exactly. That's where I would have paid for a pool at my new house. But in any case, my question is for you, David. So actually watching the show, yes, you went and looked up some videos. Do you feel like it was easy enough that you were able to enjoy the show, or was so much happening like I got to write down all this stuff that I got to look up? Did you like open up your like an app and like or like just jot down like I got to figure who's this, what's that, did this happen on the show? Oh, it's something that didn't happen on the show, so nobody knows it. What how much of a disadvantage did you feel you were at watching the show, David?
I felt I was at a disadvantage, but not as much as maybe people that didn't put the effort in. So
Fair.
I made the effort to research and watch recap videos and then breakdown videos to see like what I missed and what that meant and why did they have a problem with that person. And so I got it all, like I said, by around episode 3-ish. Then occasionally they'd make a reference. I'd have to look up and see what they were talking about. There was a lot of fan service, but if you're not a fan of Rebels, then the fan service was kind of lost on you. If I'm a casual viewer with Disney Plus, and I like Star Wars, and I like The Mandalorian, and I put this on, I'd be completely lost. I would imagine a lot of people went, "What? Who is she? And what's the?
Yeah.
Why is Ezra? And who are the whales?" And you know,
Yeah, I would say if somebody's like, "Oh, I've only ever seen the Star Wars movies. Should I jump in at Ahsoka?" I'd be like, "No, you should start with the Mandalorian." It's like that's a much more accessible place to start, you know.
yeah, that's where my
And
experience with her was with
when
Mandalorian.
she showed up on the Mandalorian, yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, Rosario Dawson is phenomenal. I've always enjoyed her. You know, we got to see a lot more of her than some of us might have expected in that Danny Boyle movie, but this is also not the show for that.
Hold on, let me get my pen. Write that down.
Okay, yeah, you should definitely jot that down. That's don't just get the recap video. Just go watch it. Yeah, her and James McAvoy. It's actually it's a very underappreciated film, but she also ended up with Dante from Clerks. You know, so I mean, she's checking off everything. She was the night nurse on Daredevil. I mean, she was
the night nurse on all Netflix shows.
That's true. Not just on Daredevil. You're absolutely right.
She was Mrs. Cory Booker for a while too. Let's not.
Well, she was just dating him, I believe, right? They didn't.
Oh yes, but I mean, the same way that
she's very accomplished.
She was the same way that Travis Kelce is Mr. Taylor Swift at the moment.
Yeah, she was his plus one for a while.
That's correct.
Exactly.
She was his night nurse.
Oh, my bell's nowhere nearby, but if it was close, you would have gotten it for it. So yeah, and I felt like I knew enough, like I knew who Sabine was, and I think that was important. And for some reason, some of the shows I get on the list where I get advances, and then some shows I don't. Loki season 1, I got in advance. Loki season 2, I didn't. Ahsoka, I did. I got the first 2 episodes, and I didn't want to tell anybody anything, but I was like, oh, it's a good thing that they put the first 2 episodes together, because I'm the dummy. I'm like, wow, they killed Sabine in the first episode of the show. I didn't see that coming, and then it's like, oh, okay, no, well, they didn't. And we're going to talk about all the spoilers. The show's been over for a couple weeks, by the way.
Yeah, I think we're 10 days removed.
Yeah, we're 10 days removed. And also, I mean, we're like 2 months removed from the premiere of the series. But we're talking about everything. So if you haven't seen the show, it's always important to let people know that this isn't the place to go for spoiler-free conversation. Right. I find those incredibly frustrating as a host, and also frustrating as a fan. When people are like, well, we're not going to get any spoilers. I'm like, well, that's kind of what I want to be able to talk about.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So, but I think that there was a lot of things that were interested. I think it's good that we got her in The Mandalorian, that we got to see live action Ahsoka prior to this. I don't think it would have really hurt the show in any way to not have it, but it definitely helped to have her. So what did you have mixed feelings about the idea of Ryan bringing her to live action when you knew she was going to be on Mandalorian and getting Bo-Katan, which obviously also from the animated world, but also expertly done. And I want to call the actress Cara Thrace, but that's her name on Battlestar Galactica.
Oh no, Catherine. Yeah, well, that'll come to me, but
it'll come to me in a second. But
Katie, isn't it Katie?
Katie Sackhoff. Thank you,
Starbuck.
Yeah,
incredible. Yeah. You know, I didn't have any apprehension. I was so excited to see her come to live action for Mandalorian. I think she's like one of the best characters in Star Wars. I think the relationship with the audience to this character has been really interesting because, unlike you, I think I was in the camp with a lot of fans when that movie, the anime movie, came out, where I just wasn't into the character at all.
You're talking about Ahsoka, right?
Ahsoka, yeah. But I think throughout the series of Clone Wars, and especially Rebels, completely fell in love with the character. And it was just such a nuanced, interesting character,
Well,
like the Padawan of
let-
Anakin Skywalker.
let's talk about that for a second because of the fact it's like, okay, it's a kid character, and that is already, I mean, poor Jake Lloyd in Phantom Menace. You bring a kid character into Star Wars, sometimes they're well received, sometimes they're not. I think more people than not like the young Princess Leia on the Kenobi series. I've definitely heard from people who didn't, but I think that there were enough people that I talked to that were like, yeah, I could see that little girl growing up and being the Leia that we saw in A New Hope.
Yeah.
It's not that much of a jump,
I-
but so getting her for the first time, but there was that issue of like, okay, so wait a minute. So Anakin has an apprentice and we don't hear about it in Revenge of the Sith. You know what I mean?
I mean, I think. Sorry, I just jumping right in. I think
Yeah, go ahead.
those are some questions though that like just for the past 10+ years, like you're either on board or not.
Yeah,
Like I
but
think I think
but when that movie came out, it was a lot harder to be on board.
it was tough, but
Yeah.
I think that they earned it through those animated shows, and I think the characters stock in terms of like overall hype and attention and people loving the characters at an all-time high following Mandalorian season 2, just because her intro was so great. That episode was amazing. Just like the whole storming that village and her fighting what is now, I guess, like she was a night sister, and then having that line of like, where is Admiral Thrawn? Just awesome. I thought this series had like such a perfect tee up. Just if people who weren't too familiar with the character and you got that snippet in Mandalorian, now you're like, oh, interesting. Like this is a cool Jedi. And then for those of us who've loved her for many years, you're like finally kind of getting like a vindication in live action, even though I think both are equally great. So I think going into the show, stock at an all-time high, very excited. And this is also Dave Filoni's kind of baby. Like this is the thing he's done a bunch of shows, a bunch of characters, but this is like the first new character he wrote that he's had since 2008. It's been 15 years with this character, and this kind of felt like his big blank check. Like, you've done such great work for the company, for Lucasfilm, for this long. Here's your show. You can do this show. And yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that it makes sense that it was earned over time. There ended up being 7 seasons of Clone Wars, right? I mean, there
Yes.
was like the one season that just kind of all got dumped on Netflix, and then the Disney Plus sort of I don't know, requel. I don't know what you call it when a show comes back after a while like that. Obviously, it's easier to do with the animated series, but
Yeah, the actors didn't age at all. It was amazing.
it was amazing. Yeah, I know. It's exactly. It's it's easy to forget that there was like those 4 years that like Family Guy wasn't on TV, but it's very easy to do. You don't have to try and rebuild the sets. I think that makes it easier. And Rebels was 5 seasons, or no, they were talking about this was 4 seasons because somebody said that this was season 5. Yeah. But so yeah, I think that's a lot to keep track of. And I think that they, I would read a lot of comic book and novel tie-ins for Star Wars, Star Trek, a lot of different things. And whenever they would introduce new characters, there was always this feel of like, yeah, but it's not like this character that I'm reading is interesting, but it's not real. And that's why when we were talking earlier, I was so excited that, many years later, the Grand Admiral Thrawn was going to show up on Rebels, because I loved that character. I honestly didn't think we would ever actually see him, as canon, as it were, especially after the sale to Disney. So I can, the fact that Dave Filoni has done such a good job of, saying like, oh no, we're not just picking and choosing the animated stuff. It's all relevant, whether you choose to watch it or not, that's on you. And I don't know. I felt like they did a good enough job, but I had watched a little bit. So I think that helped. And I do want to talk about the actual show itself. I think that it did start strong, and I think that it's the same thing, when you have, obviously in a number of cases, you're able to, because Katie Sackhoff was the voice actor for Bo-Katan. So that was an easy choice, unless I'm mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought she was the voice actor. Yeah,
Yep.
Right. And it's not Mads Mikkelsen. It's Lars Mikkelsen.
Lars
He had done the
Mikkelsen, yeah.
voice of Thrawn for the animated series. So, in those cases, it made sense. But in the case of Ahsoka, obviously, I mean, Ashley Eckstein's her name, right? She was playing her as a little girl. So it made sense that it's like, all right, well, we're going to have this adult version of her. And just because of where I'm talking about it, let's talk for a second about that flashback episode, because the actress that they cast as young Ahsoka, I was just like, I don't know where they found her, but somehow they found the young actress who actually brought that version of the character to life. And it was exciting to see Hayden Christensen. In some ways, though, I was like, imagine if this had come out before Obi-Wan Kenobi, because we just got to see him,
Sure.
and I think it would have had more impact if he showed up first in this show, but then it takes away from Kenobi. So I don't know, but it wasn't like a shock that we got to see him. But Ryan, that of all the episodes in the whole season, that was the one I was like, I gotta check in on Ryan. I'm like, how's he doing after the flashback where they're acting out scenes from the series. We get to see Anakin. We get to see him a couple of times on the show.
Yes.
But so talk a little bit about just your thoughts. We'll talk about the series as a whole, but I feel like that's a great place to start, is that episode,
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think right. So that's the World Between Worlds episode. I think that's called Shadow Warrior. It's yeah, that was a really special one. I think that was the episode that really kicked this show into high gear. I think there was some stuff missing from the first several episodes, and just like a bit of an unclear direction, whereas that one really provided some like meat to kind of bite off. I loved it. I thought that was probably the highlight of the series, was that episode. I thought it provided a whole new totally recontextualized the relationship between Ahsoka and Anakin in a really brilliant way. I thought it's easy, I think, in an animated show for a character like Ahsoka, who's a child, or like almost a teenager, fighting alongside Anakin, to kind of forget that she's a kid. And I think that was a big, very bold choice, I thought, in that flashback. Like, none of this I thought was like empty calorie fan service. I thought this was very intentional. Oh yeah, you forget, like, this is a kid. Like, seeing an actor or an actress portray young Ahsoka, you're like, wow, the Jedi were having children fight in this war. Like, it provided a whole new layer to me. And it's not as easy as like, oh, Anakin, they flipped a switch and he turned, into Darth Vader. There was always a bit of hypocrisy in his teaching. He might have taught her to be a great leader, or sorry, a great fighter, but I don't think he really knew how much he was kind of messing her up psychologically. Because there is this theme throughout the entire series, this Ahsoka series that just came out, where she's having trouble being a master. And I think that's because her own master was teaching her at such a young age that, like, you have to be a fighter, you have to be in a war, you have to know what it's like to be on the battlefield. And like, that's what makes a great Jedi, is being a fighter on the battlefield, like being a soldier. And I think that's kind of a big flaw for Anakin, which is that's actually not what makes a great Jedi. Like, she kind of has this epiphany in those flashbacks. I feel like that whole episode was a therapy episode for her, where she's kind of realizing, oh, like, this wasn't all true. Like, I think my master was wrong about a lot of this stuff. Like, I didn't need to fight. I could have chose not to. And that's actually, I think, what kept her away from going to the dark side, and what kind of made Anakin go to the dark side. And even when they're fighting, I think on the World Between Worlds, he has some line about like, he wants her to kill him, and she chooses not to. And I think that's kind of the difference between the two of them, is that she can kind of turn it off. Like, she can hold back, she can choose to live. I think she has that line. And I just thought it was a great episode. And the whole reason it being live action really elevated it. Like, seeing that kid be in just a battlefield, like a war zone, that was wild. And it makes you think, like, wow, the Jedi are kind of messed up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the fact that they didn't just have, well, adult Ahsoka is reliving it, so we could have Rosario Dawson there in those scenes, and logically it would have worked. But I agree, the impact of like, oh yeah, this is a war, and I think that's kind of the important thing about the Clone Wars was, before we ever got the prequels, we heard about them, and it's my father fought beside you in the Clone Wars. It's a line from A New Hope, and it's like, well, what are those? Well, you're gonna have to wait a really long time, but
Yeah, they
we'll
hadn't
let you know
been. They hadn't even been probably contemplated at that point.
I think George had an idea and what they were, but yeah, I agree that it's just like, what is that? We'll get to it. Don't worry. But to actually finally get them. But I do agree that if you only watch the prequels, you just watch, episodes 1, 2, and 3. Well, I know, but the idea that like, oh man, it does happen really fast for Anakin, to be able to spend a little bit more time to kind of watch, the struggle and all that. I think the fundamental story goes back to the fact that Obi-Wan was also too young to have an apprentice. So that's where I think the first mistake happens. Great Jedi, all that. I get it. And so then Anakin has an apprentice. And then it doesn't necessarily go the way that anybody would have wanted it to. And perhaps Ahsoka ought to also have not had an apprentice. So it asks a lot of questions about, the lineage of like, where's the mistake? I mean, I think in Phantom Menace, Yoda is like, yeah, I don't think so. I don't think this is a good idea. And it's like, what does Yoda know?
Everything.
Yeah. But because we started with that episode, and I think it's great to sort of juxtapose, David, I assume that you figured like, okay, I understand what these scenes must be. Did you feel like it was good character stuff, or did you feel like it was fan service for a fan who wasn't necessarily you?
I think Ryan nailed it in his breakdown of that whole episode. I thought it was a little bit of fan service. I think if you're a huge fan, you're like, this is awesome. Look at that. I mean, the girl was great. She looked like a young Ahsoka.
Yeah.
But I think you nailed it in that. Wait a minute. She's on Mandalore in the middle of a war, and she's like 12, 11, whatever, however old she was.
Yeah.
And they weren't protecting her. They were like, look, the lightsaber can do a lot, but it can't protect you from getting shot in the back. She was at war against Mandalorians. So, yeah, I thought it was interesting for me to see the backstory, which I then, I went back and looked more into it. But I thought it was a fantastic episode. Her interactions with Anakin were terrific, especially because I only knew that her master obviously failed because he turned to the dark side and then killed everyone she knew in Order 66. So probably not the best teacher in the world, but he did teach her some things that lasted and stuck with her. But the fact that she had a come to Vader moment, we'll say, with him, where she realized, like, she had this epiphany where, wait a minute, my life was a lie. I can be better than this. You weren't a great teacher. You taught me some things, but you were wrong. Like, I think she never, as a child, would have said to Anakin that he was wrong. But as an adult, she can look and go, you know what? He may have been wrong. And plus, she has the beauty of hindsight. She knows he turned into Darth Vader. So she already knows he made mistakes along the way that she probably should not repeat.
Yeah, and because we're speaking about it, I want to shout out. Her name is Ariana Greenblatt, and it's not just because her name is similar to mine. I felt like we should actually shout her out because she did a tremendous job playing the younger version of Ahsoka. Basically it's the the animated series version of her. From that point.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so I think she did a tremendous job, and I honestly I wouldn't be shocked if we ever saw her again as a young Ahsoka. And when we sort of talk about the series as a whole, we'll definitely wind things down in this hour plus, where we'll talk a little bit about what we think should happen next, what we expect to happen next, all that. But I think that it's because Dave Filoni is so heavily involved, not just with the animated series. The fact that he's on board for these live action, that's why the attention to detail, there's such care in bringing these people to life, like bringing Katie Sackhoff as Bo-Katan, actually giving Ryan the Cad Bane that he wanted just, a little bit later. But, I think you would have liked more time with him, but that's neither here nor there.
I was going to say just one quick thing.
Sure.
I think like the other thing that's just big about that episode is there's this through line that like, oh, she never completed the training with Anakin. Like she says that several times in the episodes leading up to that one. And that might be a reason why she can't be a successful master, because she never finished the training with her own master. She's definitely found a lot of things out along the way on her own. And I think she's like a great Jedi, but and when it comes to being a master, she never saw that end. And all this happened with Anakin kind of off screen without her. And I think she, in a way, does finish the training by kind of reconciling with what she's kind of repressed about him in her mind, and that like she's acknowledging like, okay, like he was flawed. Like there was a flawed individual training me in certain areas.
I mean, look, I there might be something to be said for not finishing your Jedi training, because if you think about Revenge of the Sith, all the Jedi who did finish their training, all the Mace Windus and everybody, how did they do against the Emperor? And, I don't care what Yoda told him. Luke didn't finish his training. In Return of the Jedi, he's like, all right, I got to leave Tatooine so I can go finish my training. And Yoda's like, look, I'm about to die now. Your training's done. You're fine. You know everything you need to. Really?
Yeah, but he also didn't beat the
last
Emperor,
time I saw you. Sorry, the last time I saw you, Yoda, you told me I shouldn't leave. But okay, I guess I know everything now. And I'm sorry. What did you say, David?
Oh, I said he didn't beat the Emperor either, Luke. It was his father who defeated the Emperor.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
It's a great parallel because, well, he doesn't finish it in Empire, and he goes and gets his arm cut off, and he loses, and then he does finish it after that. I think like she realizes her master, Anakin, his legacy was death and war. Like there's that incredible shot of him going back to the battlefield, and there's like some explosion, and he like blinks as Vader for a hot sec. I think they do that a few times.
Yeah,
like one of the coolest shots. But there's a great mirror actually between her and Luke in that episode, where when she's fighting Anakin in the World Between Worlds, I think like holds a blade to his neck, and it perfectly mirrors that moment in Return of the Jedi when Luke is like battering Vader and he's about to like going for the kill blow, and then he kind of like realizes and restrains himself and regathers himself and stops. She does that too. Like they both have this moment of considering killing him, and Anakin considered it because, Ahsoka considered it because she was trained by Anakin and inherited that kind of gene. And same with Luke, like that's on a more father-son level. I think they both have that like killing DNA inside of them that connects to Anakin, but they both choose to live. And that's what makes them great. Like they have like the best parts of Anakin and can kind of remove the worst.
I want to bring this comment into the chat from our pal Daniel Drew, who's always so thoughtful. He's talking about Anakin and the relationship with Palpatine, which I always give such credit to Ian McDiarmid, who plays Senator Palpatine and, of course, also Emperor Palpatine, just because of the way that he like underplays the character in Phantom Menace. Say what you want about Phantom Menace. He's just amazing. He's like, oh, I don't know. I can't believe that I'm the chancellor. I mean, me? Oh my gosh. I hope I'm up to the, and he's so great. But this idea that, he takes Anakin. So Daniel's saying that he's literally being groomed from the age of 9. It happens over time to trust your groomer. You can't downplay the level of manipulation Palpatine had over Anakin's formative years. And to the extent, I mean, he had no idea. He thought that this guy's your friend in the same way that Ben Kenobi is,
Sure.
They only called him Obi-Wan at that point, but you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I think that when you peel it all back, it's so interesting to explore the backstory of, arguably the most important character in all of Star Wars, because without Anakin Skywalker's, descent into Darth Vader, you don't. There's no need for the first movie, So it really all stems from Anakin, and just getting that in depth of the exploration of it. I think it's important. And I think that I had thought about this when I did a previous show about this. The fact that Lucas went back in the special edition and put one of the special editions and put Hayden Christensen in instead of the actor whose name was Sebastian Shaw in the end, it like lends itself to this idea that he can be that Anakin here. And somebody told me that I think it's a novel, but it's a novel that's considered canon. There's times where he shows up as old Anakin, and there's other times where he's the younger one. Was that something that you were aware of, David? You raised your hand there.
No, and I'm not sure if I've mentioned this in previous videos we've done, but let's put ourselves in Luke's place at the end of Jedi.
Yeah.
In the original version, he looks over, he sees Yoda, he sees Obi-Wan, he sees his father, right?
Yeah.
Then they change it to Hayden Christensen. If you're Luke Skywalker, you never saw a picture of your father as a young man. So you're looking over there going, there's Yoda. There's Obi-Wan Kenobi. Who's that kid?
Yeah. Yeah.
He looked over and smiled like, there's my dad, but he'd have no way of knowing that was his dad.
Is that my buddy Biggs's nephew from Tashi Station that I met once?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a great point. It must be, but I don't know. I think that it definitely makes it easier for it to be young Anakin or, younger Anakin. And look, I understand CGI manipulation. I understand good lighting, but God bless Hayden Christensen 20 years later. And he, it's not like, it's not like they had to de-age him like De Niro in The Irishman,
Sure.
So it's
Harrison
like,
Ford, yeah.
Yeah.
Although they did a much better job de-aging him this time than in the Obi-Wan series.
Yes.
What do you think about that, Ryan? You agree?
Yeah, no, for sure.
Okay.
I thought he looked great. I was so psyched to see him. I think that's another big win for me on the show. And something I loved is just seeing Hayden Christensen back and kicking butt and nailing it. I think like as amazing as George Lucas was, it's pretty clear that like this guy had a better performance in him, and it might have just taken like a different guy directing him to maybe bring the good acting out.
Yeah.
Not to say he is that bad in the prequels, but I just think he's a lot stronger in this.
Well, he also isn't whining. They had him whining all the time and complaining and being a brat.
And I will also say this, like I'm probably getting way too into this now, but I thought I know he watched the animated show before this. I guess
Hayden Christensen did,
and you could tell he was channeling like vocally the performance of the voice actor who did the Anakin in the Clone Wars show. I could tell he definitely was mixing the two, and I thought that was also really cool to watch.
Yeah, I mean it is an interesting point. His name is Matt Lanter.
Yeah.
He has, even with Hayden Christensen, taking up the character a couple times in the last couple of years, he's still, done so many more hours as Anakin Skywalker, is Matt Lanter. So I think the idea that he would give that much respect to a different actor's performance, I think that speaks highly of it. What I wanted to also focus on, though, is a couple of other characters that we're getting to see. I think it's very easy to get the droid. Who is his name? Huang, or how do you?
Hu Yang.
Hu Yang. Yeah, that's it. Hu Yang. And of course, it's David Tennant, who is phenomenal. Many people's favorite Doctor on Doctor Who, David Tennant.
Sure.
He's also a great voice actor, great actor in general. But so that was easy enough, and it was, I'm sure, welcome to see him. I have to shout out Genevieve O'Reilly as Mon Mothma, who she was great in
Andor.
Thank you. there's a couple of words I've been looking for tonight. A little too much sun at the pumpkin patch, Ryan. I appreciate it.
All good.
But so getting to see her in Andor, and that actress, coming back as Mon Mothma, I think was great. And really getting to, we know that character so much more because of really Andor. I mean, we really got to spend so much time with her, but I think that was great. But I want to ask you, Ryan, specifically, I mentioned Lars Mikkelsen as Thrawn. What are your thoughts on Ezra, who we don't really see until later? in the series, but it is very clearly an older Ezra. He's got a beard. So the actor, his name is Iman Safandi. I believe I said it correctly.
Sure.
And if I didn't, it was close enough. What did you think about sort of the reveal? I mean, it was. I don't know really the backstory. I feel like the voice actor for Rebels was not someone who could play in live action. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but
I thought this guy did great. I thought he was another big highlight for me in terms of what I loved about the show. Just a perfect older portrayal of that character. I was really thrilled with everything he did. I think yeah, and when it comes to his performance, that the actor did great. I thought when it comes to writing, maybe some things left to be desired, but I thought his performance was great.
And what did you think of Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Hera? Which, unless I'm mistaken, it was Peg Bundy was the voice on the animated series.
I forget who voiced her in the animated show, but Mary Elizabeth Winstead I thought did fantastic. I think this might sound a little nitpicky, but there was something a little off-putting. I don't even have a solution for this, but there was something a little off-putting with just how like green she looked. Just I think I'm so used to watching the animated show, but I was like,
yeah, I mean that was really green, right?
Yeah, there's something odd. I don't know. Again, I don't know how you fix that.
The actress's name is Vanessa Marshall. I just always thought she sounded like Peggy Bundy. I didn't mean to.
But yeah, I thought she did well. Like it's tough when.
And I like to give credit where credit is due. Ivan Soto made sure that we had that. Anyway, finish your thought though, Ryan.
No, it was great to see Hera. I mean, amazing character from Rebels. It's funny. Like I think talking to some people who didn't watch Rebels, and just seeing like, what do you think of this character? They're kind of like, just another. They're like, is this just another Rebel fighter? Oh, I guess she's like a general, and she has a son who might be force sensitive, which makes her a little more interesting, but it's not a ton to do. I thought great performance, just not a ton to do.
Yeah, right. And go ahead, David.
I was just going to wonder, is she goofy in the animated series? Because on the show, she lacked seriousness for a general.
Yeah.
Like she was almost like sitcom-y.
Yeah.
So wait, are you saying she gave you a CPO Sharky vibe, David?
Yes. Yes, okay. You definitely. Yes, thank you very much. Perfect reference.
It's Don Rickles for people that aren't old like David.
She just was like, I just kept seeing like the freeze frame, like at the end of the episode with her, like she was just for someone who's a general and is supposed to be a leader and noble. I thought she was too unnoble to be a general and too lighthearted all the time, even when she was serious. And I'm sorry, who brings their kid along on an intergalactic mission? That seemed weird.
Yeah. Totally agree.
It's a
I mean, if she could find a babysitter, might as well come with us.
Yeah. The New Republic doesn't have children's services, to follow up. It's like, I don't care that you're a general. Why couldn't you find somebody to spend time with your kid? Obviously for people that are just fans of Star Wars on the whole, that come from the original movies, live action, there was one surprise appearance that I think, just delighted everyone. And of course, that is our friend C-3PO. And I didn't know that there was any chance that we were going to get to see him in this. And, David, you might not know this, but Ryan works in post-production. And I'm just thinking now as I'm talking about it, imagine if you were working post-production on this show. So you knew like a year ago that like C-3PO shows up and is like, I'm the only one to know. Like, it's in my head. I couldn't imagine carrying that around, but for me, I was just so glad to see him. Yes, I think that obviously the passing of Carrie Fisher, the only real solution was, well, 3PO's got a message from her. That's very logical that she would do that. You know what I mean? And you have to like suspend the disbelief. I would much rather get Anthony Daniels back as C-3PO than have some kind of AI Carrie Fisher de-aged to
Agreed.
be a message, anything like that. This
Yeah.
was perfect. I loved that. What did you think, David, when the 3PO just, saunters
Well-
in there into the hearing?
Well, first of all, she usually gives her messages through R2D2, so this was a change for her. She
Yeah.
recorded her message for Obi-Wan.
Right.
I audibly yelled in my living room when he walked in. I was so ridiculously excited because to me that was, I'm watching this show that's in the world I'm used to, but I don't really know the characters other than Anakin popping in.
Yeah.
And then to have him show up, it was like the ultimate crossover. It's like you're watching Guardians of the Galaxy and you didn't really read the comic. Then Captain America pops up. You're like, oh, okay, it's Marvel. To have him come in to me was like, now it's Star Wars because C-3PO is in almost everything, right? He and R2D2 are in all the movies. Nobody else is.
Right, and that was George's like original vision when he was, I think at one point he was going to do 12 movies, and he thought that was going to be the through line through all of them, and I think that idea makes so much sense that Disney, J.J. Abrams, everybody was like, well, no, we still need to have them, and so yeah, I think it's important to continue to have them. But back to what you're saying, David.
No, I just loved it. I hope Anthony Daniels lives forever. But this is a character that if he wasn't around, you could still continue. You could emulate his voice, but you never see Anthony Daniels. So much like Chewbacca, you just keep going. So I was ecstatic. The message he delivered, the gravitas that he has in that world, like no one's going to argue with C-3PO, right? He could have been lying. He didn't really prove that Princess Leia said that. He didn't have like, a hologram video from her. They took his word for it because obviously they watched the movies. They know he's C-3PO.
Yeah. I mean, I think R2D2 would lie, but I honestly, I don't think C-3PO can lie.
Oh, D2's a scammer.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. He's calling up retirees, asking them for their credit card numbers.
You don't know which is his front, which is his back. He's spinning. You can't,
Ryan, what did you think about C-3PO walking in there?
I don't have a ton to say. I think it was really great to see him. It's absolute delight.
And I think it's they wisely. It wasn't in any of the materials. It wasn't in the trailer. So
I think
go ahead.
The thing like I would love to just like talk about is because I think this moment with him popping up is relevant to this, is just like the overall writing of this show, because
Sure.
I think like a big hurdle for me for a lot of this show is, and Star Wars in general, it's like we all go into Star Wars stuff with wanting different things. And for me, and maybe even for y'all, it's moments. And like, this is a great moment when he popped in, like that was awesome. And that gives you the chills and makes you nostalgic. It's great. It makes sense for all the reasons you were just saying. But I think there was a lot of stuff in this series that just I found so questionable in terms of the writing, which was one of the last things I expected, because Dave Filoni's been writing Star Wars for 15 years.
Yeah.
Some of the best Star Wars we've gotten over the past 15 years. That was kind of the last thing I expected to encounter with like having an issue, because a lot of this stuff was a little bit of empty calories for me. On just a straight up writing level, I thought this was executed well. It was great to see him, but like I was kind of confused with that entire storyline of they're giving Hera problems when she like wants a fleet to go to this planet that Ahsoka claims there might be some bad stuff going on at, and they're like, I guess there's Imperial people that have infiltrated the rebellion. That's kind of what they're hinting at there, and that's why they're giving him so much crap and not.
I think knowing that that this leads to eventually the First Order and the sequel trilogy, knowing that there is the infiltration, I think that it makes sense that there's the resistance. Daniel Drew again in the chat, the particular council douche, the one who was really giving the pushback on Hera, that basically has to shut up when 3PO shows up. He was the father of the lead character of Star Wars Resistance. I actually don't even what Star Wars Resistance. He says he's a jerk there too.
Star Wars
And
Resistance is another
in
animated show that,
Oh, okay.
that
Is it Disney XD?
it was Disney XD is probably like the least popular one, and I don't actually think Filoni had any um, writing like contribution to that, and that takes place right before Force Awakens. That's like the timeline of Resistance.
Okay.
It's like 2 or 3 years before that. I didn't know that. That's an interesting little
Yeah.
Easter egg.
Well,
But
that's why I need Daniel Drew in literally every chat for everything I do. He's like he's the one man encyclopedia / Cliff's Notes. I mean, yeah.
Did any of that give you pause though? Because I found
Yes.
myself wanting to leave every single scene that wasn't Ahsoka and Balin and Shin and on another
Yeah.
galaxy. And every time we cut back, I'm like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I think that as we're going along, the expectation was a payoff that we didn't get. But I also, I mean, my biggest problem with this show is that it doesn't even come close to having an ending, and it's like, if there's another season, great. I can't imagine that the story wouldn't continue, whether it's another season, whether it's like, Disney Plus movies, maybe 1 or 2 to tie it up. But I feel like you can't end it the way it does without continuing the story. So I agree. Ryan, you said empty calories. There is definitely that feeling because there's a lot of it that's so fun. Characters that I knew well enough, like I said, getting to see Sabine for the first time. And I'm like, yes, they did a great job casting her, and all of that, and getting to see characters that, varying degrees of familiarity all the way up to C3PO. You mentioned Andor earlier, and when we cut away from him and Andor, it was still interesting. Honestly, those scenes with Mon Mothma probably shouldn't have been as interesting as they were on Andor. You know what I mean?
Oh my
Where it's
God.
like
Incredible.
right.
Incredible.
But it's just like, okay, so
That's the other
like,
thing. It's
yeah,
like we've seen it be amazing.
Yes. You know what?
We've seen stuff with her be amazing. Like Shakespeare. And then to see this, you're like,
The big difference is that Mon Mothma was a bright woman who saw the danger, right?
Yeah.
She took everything seriously. What we got in this one, which Ryan pointed out, that the dumb senator, he's the captain in every cop show who doesn't you get out of my office, you hand in your badge.
You're off the force, McGarnacle.
Right. Every horror movie where they don't believe there's actually a killer.
Yeah.
Every time, like, you didn't see that? I didn't see anything. You must be imagining. It's a cliched, awful, shake your television character that he played. And you're like, has he not seen the movies? Because evil keeps rising. But this time, no. This time, there's going to be no evil.
Like, no.
You're
clearly nipped it in the bud. Even though it's actually dealt with on this series.
And I thought
cliche. Ryan's right. The writing, that part of the writing was terrible. When you have legitimate people giving you legitimate context, and you're like, oh, it's impossible. Well, if you're wrong, the world's going to end. So maybe just let her go off. Let her try. And if she's wrong, she's a general. How do you not trust her? You're an elected official. You're a bozo, which is what we deal with in real life, right? You have elected officials who are acting as experts in areas they're not experts. And he should have been smart enough to say, you know what? I don't know what I don't know. You're a general. You fought these battles. If you feel there's an imminent danger of us being completely destroyed, 1%, go investigate.
Yeah.
I think they are also playing on a, like, oh, he's a mole. He's an Imperial mole. I think that was something they're alluding to there, because they're like,
and everyone else is stupid for not realizing it.
That's the other thing.
Somebody in the scene stupid.
That's the thing. Like, I don't want to be the guy, because Andor, I mean, we can talk about Andor another time, but Andor is like flat out amazing and some of the best Star Wars ever. And I think, like, it's all right to have different flavors of your Star Wars writing. It's all right to have one that's a little more like adventurous and not like the Tony Gilroy incredible drama writing probably will win best drama at the Emmys this year writing. I think it's all right to have different flavors, but it was off-putting when like an actress playing the same character from one show with like this style writing pops up in this show, and you just know how great she is, and how like given the right material, it just flies off the screen in Andor. And then seeing her in this,
Yeah.
it was a little disappointing. But I also think, like, unfortunately, that's how I felt with a lot of this show.
Right.
Is there was a lack of tension throughout this entire series. I mean, I'm sorry if we're jumping around, but
No, it's okay. Yeah,
that
I
that,
think
that was
that's
a
the way to
big
do it.
flaw I had here. Like, and that's something that's I have not felt with the other shows. Like, I think Andor, Mando, Obi-Wan, Andor and Obi-Wan, those are two shows that, like, we know those characters live because they're in stuff that takes place after, but they do a great job of still kind of like pulling out the drama of, like, oh, this relationship with Anakin and Obi-Wan. Even if it wasn't all a home run, I'm still tuning in each week wondering what's going to happen. And I every single character in this show I thought had plot armor. Like, there wasn't a single one I thought was going to die, except for really the witch character, who does die in the
Yeah.
finale. And then except for Balin and Shin, because those are two great, real, such a great new characters introduced perfectly. But
Yeah.
Ahsoka, not for a second
No.
did I think she dies.
No,
Sabine, not
but
so when she gets stabbed, not for a second did I
right,
think
but
she
she
would
could die in season 2, because the same way you watch the prequel series and you're like, oh, look at the Jedi Council. There's no Jedi Council in Star Wars 4, episode
Right.
4. So you knew they were
Yeah.
all going to die. So none of these people are in the sequel trilogy.
True.
So Thrawn could die at any moment. Not obviously he's a great character, but this whole bunch, they could either be trapped in another galaxy, right, where they bring him back for Rey's next movie, or they're all going to die because they're not in 7. So
Yeah.
they have plot armor for now, but they don't have plot armor for 7, 8, 9.
Totally.
Right. It's plot Kevlar, but there's like a zipper up the back. So,
Right. They have
it's not
30
it's not as
years.
secure as it could be. It'd be very
Right, they
quick
have-
to have it yanked off.
Well,
They
it's
have to-
just tough. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I did want to just comment on Mon Mothma now that you made that analogy, and I've been thinking about it in the last 5 minutes. Mon Mothma from Jedi and Andor would have found a way to either have that guy killed or or removed from the council. She would have blackmailed someone to take him out. She wouldn't have sat there and been like, "Yeah, we voted. Sorry." She would.
I agree. I agree with you,
seen
but
a scene of her in an alleyway saying, "This guy is going to cost us everything."
But
and then he's
now, what that makes me think, what you're saying, David, is it supports their approach for the series, because it's like, yes, that Mon Mothma would have been able to pull that off, but that's how little influence she's able to have. She has it up to a point now, but this, former future Imperial element that has infiltrated the New Republic is actually too strong. And
Sure.
On that note, I always like to give Daniel Drew credit. He wants to point out that Resistance is actually months before Episode
Sure.
7. Star Killer base destroyed at the Hosnian Prime system from Episode 7. So just because I want to make sure that when Daniel knows more than I do, I want to make sure that I share it with everybody. And he makes this point too, by the way, that the Ghost, the ship from Rebels, does show up. You see it in Episode 9, which I forgot until he said that.
But I mean,
but
anyone
who's
could
in
be
it?
flying. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
The
Exactly.
Millennium Falcon, you belong to someone before Han Solo. Who knew?
Yeah.
And then we knew.
Yeah, I think there is a thing with the right. Like, I think another element of the writing, though, just minus who's in future stuff or not, it's just the way they wrote this show. There's no way Thrawn, like, the whole show's about, like, oh, we have to go stop him. We haven't even seen him yet. It's like, so I know he's fine for the show. So when there's this thing in the finale of, like, he might not get out, he might not escape, it's like, he's escaping. Like, that's it's gonna be fine. And, like, Ezra, we just got him back. He's gonna be fine. So when there's all this build up to, like, will he make it across the platform, or is he gonna fall and die? I'm like, he's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
He's
part
gonna
of this.
yeah.
But
or even with Ahsoka, like, this idea that oh, Balin pushed her off the ledge and she must be dead. It's like, the show's called Ahsoka. Like, she's not gonna die. Like, I just think there's some. What's a great example is at the 5th episode that's in the World Between Worlds. That's a different kind of drama, different kind of tension. It's like all relationship, and I just think they
No.
needed more of that.
I mean, a lot of our popular culture is built on villains who don't go the extra mile to make sure that they've been successful. And that's why I think Thrawn is such a strong adversary, because he's like, "Are you sure she's dead? Because I don't have a good feeling." If Grand Admiral Thrawn took on James Bond, he wouldn't have made it through the second act of Doctor No. I mean, there would have been nothing.
He wouldn't have told Batman that
Yeah.
we'll be on the bank on 3rd and Main while you are waiting for the pendulum to slowly lower over the next 6 hours.
And obviously, we can talk about this show and Star Wars all night. But as I look towards trying to wind down, we've sort of mentioned in passing, I do want to talk about Baylan and Shin. Baylan, it was portrayed by an actor named Ray Stevenson, who was also one of our Punishers. He was in Punisher Warzone. Not necessarily our worst Punisher, but definitely our worst Punisher movie. That's not Ray Stevenson's fault. But I thought that he was
a friend of Thor's.
Right. I thought that he was great. And he has unfortunately passed on since this show was filmed, which, obviously,
such a loss.
It's like a loss of life is obviously tragic, but it's just to think about, like, oh my gosh, what he would have been able to do if there was more of this. But I thought that it was interesting because he and Shin and Ivana Sakano, was that actress's name?
Yeah.
I thought that they were great because it wasn't like our usual, Sith and apprentice. They're not. They were definitely in business for themselves, which I thought was interesting. Yes, they were mercenaries, but he had a bigger picture, and I thought that was interesting. And they only scratched the surface on that. And I think it's important to talk about how great they were. We got some great lightsaber fights with both of them.
They
I
were
thought
fantastic.
that was great.
Oh shit!
What's the matter? What happened, Ryan?
Sorry, I was frozen for a hot sec.
Oh, no, you looked fine to
My
us.
bad.
So no, it's probably us.
Okay.
I thought you said something wrong.
No, I know. I was like, wait a minute. Did you work on this show? Did you know something? No. But no, it's fine. And if you freeze, it'll unfreeze.
All good. I got worried. I was like, uh-oh.
No, we're good now.
No, we had that problem on our last podcast.
Yeah, that's true. We had some issues with my buddy Eric. But in any case, yes, I thought they were great. And I think that's one of those important things to talk about. And I want to get your thoughts on the characters. But Ryan, the way that the show ends, there's that statue that I mean, if you don't know the backstory, it's just like, okay, I guess I got to Google that, which is what I did. Talk about that though, that reveal, the way that the series ends, the way where you're like, there's no way that this story isn't going to continue in some way because of what it sets up,
Oh my God. Very complicated. Okay, so, well, first off, he's amazing. He's the highlight of the show for me. I thought he had the best performance in the whole show. I loved him and Shin's dynamic. It was something new.
Some of us might say Chopper was the best, but agree to disagree. That's fine.
Some of us might say Chopper.
I thought he was the best bad guy since Vader. Is that going too far?
Wow. I mean, he's great. Like he's
better than Kylo Ren.
Wow. I think he's great. he's awesome. I loved the mystery. Like I was so intrigued to who he was from the jump. I thought the intro to him doing a callback to Phantom Menace, just with its own little unique twist, and them not being Jedi, but they're not necessarily Sith, and he's a former Jedi. I was so keen on learning like more about his backstory. I think there was even like a theory floating around that maybe like Qui-Gon was his master at one point. I don't know. Like there were all these fun things going on, and his performance was fantastic. And he had this physical presence that even when they're fighting, you're like, this guy is a master and he's a brute, but he's also so intelligent. I gotta say, highlight for like the first 7 episodes was Baylan, but they weren't even in the 7th episode. I was so disappointed with how the series ended with them. A great reveal at the end there, which we can get into, but
yeah, well, we don't need to dwell on it, but I think it's important to talk about what that reveal is and why it's significant.
Shin's ending is just going with a tribe. You're like, Okay. But yeah, so Balin, I guess he wanted to get to this other galaxy for a different reason, which was to get to this planet where there's these statues that reminded me a lot of like Lord of the Rings, but they're referencing something from a Clone Wars episode with these three characters, which is like the father, son, and daughter, and they're kind of like the three shepherds of the Force, and like the good, the bad, and the in between. And there's a whole episode where Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka happen upon this planet where these three beings are there, and they don't. It's kind of like confusing as to what they're doing, who they are, and then you learn that they have a greater power, and they're all very involved with the Force. And I think what that ending shot was implying was that Balin is like searching to maybe take one of their places, because in that episode of Clone Wars, um, the son dies and the father dies, and at one point like Ahsoka is about to take up the mantle of being the daughter, and Anakin might take up the mantle, and they escape. You got to go see the episode. It's a great episode, but they're definitely harkening back to that. And I think what's kind of cool, I actually thought what was cooler about that reveal had to do with Anakin and not necessarily Balin, because we talked about the Force Ghost Anakin in Return of the Jedi. I've always wondered, like, why didn't he pop up in the sequels? Like, why isn't he talking to Luke or anyone in the sequel trilogy? This might be their kind of writing um, way to answer that question, which is maybe Anakin, the character of Anakin Skywalker, has taken up the mantle as either like the father or the son in this Force Trinity. Sorry, these are like really complicated big ideas.
No, but yeah, but I mean, it's important because they touch on it in the end, and if you're like me, and I assume you too, David, you're like, all right, clearly something's important, but nobody told me. I literally didn't get the memo,
And that would
I'm
be
on the
such
edge
a
of my seat
cool.
listening to Ryan right now because I didn't know any of this.
Well, that would
But
be
it would
such
make
a
sense.
cool. You got to watch this episode. It would be such a
It would
cool
make sense
route
for
them
Anakin to be
go.
the father, though, since he was Vader.
Exactly.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
think that'd be such a cool way of keeping his character relevant in an interesting way, in that he's this kind of is his excuse for not appearing everywhere as a Force ghost, because he's on another plane of the Force. But I think this would be really interesting and fascinating way of keeping Hayden Christensen around, and also the character of Anakin Skywalker around. I was also curious if like Ahsoka being trapped on that planet, does that mean she sees Anakin at the end there? Does that mean she's going to stay and maybe be the daughter? I would kind of be disappointed with that, but that's another route for that character to go. And then what happens with Balin? Is he also involved in this? It's a lot of questions, but I do think it's stuff like this that is my favorite part of this series, because the world building and the big swings it's taking are very intriguing, and I wish there was more of that throughout this show. It's just unfortunate that it's kind of sprinkled in around a lot of um, not tension filled writing.
Or as I like to call it, Trade Federation-esque stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think that it's look, you can have the conversation about what a great adversary Balin was, and I think that having Shin sort of really match up early on with Sabine, I was just like, oh yeah, this works really well. But I guess we should also talk about Morgan Elsbeth, who's the ultimately the witch character, who also, of course, ends up passing on. So that, I guess, that was sort of I don't know. I mean, it was, I guess I was gonna say it was anticlimactic, but no, I guess it was more that it made the most sense, that's really where she was supposed to end up. And we still have these witches that they get away with with Thrawn, and Ezra stows away, which that wasn't shocking. And I think we all knew that when it ends with the stormtrooper, we're like, okay, we know who that is. It was definitely a little anticlimactic in the way of, like, I don't know, there's been a lot of things that I've seen lately where it doesn't actually have an ending. And yes, of course, you can make the case that a lot of Star Wars doesn't have an ending. A lot of people will tell you Empire Strikes Back is their favorite movie. As a kid, I was infuriated 4 when I saw it, and I'm like, how about an ending? And that's why ever since I've been 7, I've always been a Return of the Jedi guy. But I felt like we needed a little bit more of an actual ending to this, and if for any reason they never continue the story, it'll be infuriating.
Oh, you know what they're going to do? They're going to finish it in Boba Fett.
I mean, I hope not.
Yeah. I was
Honestly.
frustrated by the ending of this a lot. I was very frustrated.
But here's the thing. If they do pick it up, I mean, we had a writer's strike and an ongoing SAG-AFTRA strike. So it would be no time soon, that a lot of, I on another show, another episode of this, I was talking about how, when a show used to end on a cliffhanger, the example I talked about this for Star Trek Strange New Worlds. For people who haven't seen it, season 2 ends on a cliffhanger. That's all I need to say. That show won't be back for about 2 years because they didn't go into production before the strike. It needs a lot of time for effects, and they spend money on the effects. They look good. You want them to take the time. It's going to be a while. But like in, I don't know what it was, season 4 of The Next Generation, when you used to get 24 episodes of TV shows, that ends on a really big cliffhanger, and Picard has been assimilated by the Borg. Well, that was in May, and then in September you saw what happened, and then now the thrilling conclusion. Well, it's not the case anymore. And like, how long is it going to be? And Andor was the same thing. They were, I don't know that they were in production, but I know they were writing the next season. So it's like, we're going to wait for a long time for all this stuff. And obviously it's important that the creative people involved be compensated. And, the writers ratified their deal, and hopefully SAG-AFTRA does the same thing. But then once you get past that part, it's like, oh man, we had to wait a long time for this stuff. I wish I could get excited about procedurals that are that model where they have 24 episodes every year and they only take off like 4 months, but so it's going to be a while, Ryan, and that's going to be a lot of time where it'll be swirling around in your head, where you'll wake up in the middle of the night like, wait a minute, what about this? Maybe this is where it should go next.
I know what you're hitting on. I think, and that's all the more reason I think to have be a little more critical of just where they left off here. I think like my biggest problem with this ending was it really hammered on the fact that I don't know if this show this gets so brutal, but I don't know if this show is necessarily about anything at its core for Ahsoka. I think you could argue maybe this show is about Ahsoka reconciling with her past to become a better master. And if that's the case, I don't know if it was. I think it was successful in certain areas and not successful in others. I think like with a lot of the other Star Wars shows and movies, you can point to exactly what they're about. With like Mando, it's a lone wolf and cub. It's also about being a father in the later seasons. It's about going back to your creed, your community, and even in season 3, like, do you belong? What lengths will you go to protect like your child? Same with like Obi-Wan, it's reconciling with your mistakes in your past and kind of like facing your failure. And Andor obviously is about like so many amazing things, but this show, I don't know what it was necessarily about. And I think Star Wars is the best when it is about something and also taking huge swings in this really cool world. And I don't think they were very successful with everything with Ahsoka. And I felt a little empty when it ended because yes, Ezra's back, and yes, Thrawn's back too. Exciting. I know we're getting like a movie with Thrawn and hopefully, and that's going to be interesting. I kind of wish we got to see more of like Thrawn being this incredible brute force. Like, I hate to compare it to Marvel, but when you get, this is, I guess, like the Thanos villain for this section of Star Wars. And by the time you get Thanos in Marvel, you're terrified of him. Like, you've seen a bunch, you've seen what he's capable of. So when you hit Infinity War and Endgame, it's like all hands on deck. We know what we're up against. And I think, yes, if you watch Rebels, if you read these books, this character Thrawn. But for this show, I think they were a little too reliant on that other source material. He was great. I thought his performance was great, and he definitely displayed his cunning warlord, skills. But like when Ahsoka's fighting, what is it, Elsbeth? Elsbeth.
Mhm. Yeah.
I not for a second. I think Ahsoka's gonna lose that fight. Like I think
Yeah.
I liked how they lean more into witchcraft. I think that's a really cool thing this show did. Where this is kind of like the evil force. This is like a different thing that's in this galaxy that people can use to like move things. And I thought that was really interesting. And maybe that's what Thrawn's trying to get more of like a grip on, is he's using witchcraft versus like Jedi. Awesome. But there just wasn't enough of that. And there were just big moments that I thought were lacking in this finale. I wanted the embrace of Ezra and Hera. He comes off with the stormtrooper helmet still on. It's like, dude, I would have taken that off the second I got on that ship. Like, what are you doing getting on? I don't know. There's just some crazy stuff
Sure. Yeah.
where I'm like,
Yeah, that made no sense. That was so that we would think that was an enemy for a split second.
yeah,
Yeah.
Well, we knew it was like, why would they? Right? Why would the helmet be on? I want to, as someone who doesn't know Thrawn, I also had a problem with it, because when the guys come back and they fail and they're like, they got away, I expected him to kill them. Right? You failed. I'm going to kill you. Now I don't know
Yeah.
if they're dead or not. They may already be dead. I don't know. He didn't do anything evil. He did some tactical things, like you said. But I'm looking at the guy and I go, all right, he made some good moves. But then he did the thing where he's like, send 2 ships to go after them. Why not send 100 ships to go after them? So you get them.
Well, I think that's his recognition of the risk reward, the nature of the threat. The more interesting thing about him, which, when he's first introduced in the Timothy Zahn novels, is this idea that he's an art aficionado, but it's in the way that he knows pretty much everything about all these planets that he's conquered because of his extensive study of their art. And he's just very thoughtful. And he thought the best Thrawn moment in the series was when he found out that Ahsoka's master had been Anakin Skywalker. And even like, he's usually this unflappable guy. And he's like, oh, wow, I didn't see that coming. Wow.
Right.
Okay. So she trained from the guy who became Darth Vader. Okay. Okay. Let me hold on and not move any pieces on my chessboard for a little bit, because we're clearly playing a different game here. And, sort of the thing he says at the end when he gets away is that, basically, you might have been able to best me, but today you weren't, and yeah, I think it's the promise of Thrawn in the future is what we're getting here, unfortunately, because I agree, I would have liked to have seen more, but whether anybody like David didn't know the character ahead of time, that's fine. You don't need to have that, but Daniel actually said something great in the chat. I think there needed to be more character development and less off-screen references to things that even Rebels fans hadn't seen. Show us, don't tell us. I think picking the most important moments, those exchanges between young Ahsoka and Anakin from Clone Wars, and incorporating them live action. That's like, all right, let's get everybody up to speed on sort of her present day journey through her past. But I don't know. Look, I find her to be a very interesting character. And I agree with sort of what we were talking about at the beginning of the show. When you first see her in that the Clone Wars theatrical movie, she's this kid who, they're bringing along on missions to fight the Clone Wars. You're like, what? What is this character? It's like, and it takes some getting used to. But when she showed up on Mandalorian, I was like, okay, this is really cool. Obviously, Mandalorian had some pretty cool reveals. She ended up that episode of Boba Fett that was basically an episode of Mandalorian. She's in that, right? Yeah.
She is, yeah.
Yeah. So we see her there, and we see Luke in that one. Yeah. So there's a lot of, so we've gotten a lot of her story, and as long and look, Dave Filoni is definitely a guy who has it all mapped out. Just assuming the powers that be let him tell the stories that he wants to. I have faith that it might take a while, like my my son's 8 and he's seen the original 3 Star Wars movies, and that's it at the moment. By the time he's in high school and he's seen everything, maybe that's when we'll know this conversation that we're having right now will finally pay off in
Whoa.
9 years. But I hope not. But it definitely happens that way sometimes. So
Yeah, we'll see. I mean,
yeah, but on the whole, I was interested. There was a lot of stuff that I liked along the way. I You have to reserve judgment about, like, okay, I hope it all comes together, and I hope there's a great payoff. Another season of this prior to a Thrawn movie, I think would be what we would need. But who knows what we actually get? They stay very tight-lipped over there. Not that Ryan would know anything about Disney staying tight-lipped about any of the projects that they're working on. That's all news to you. But
all news.
I want to make sure that we get any final thoughts about this season / possibly series. But I feel like it's season 1 to me. That's how I'll feel. In fact, the title of this episode refers to it as the season 1 reaction show. And if there is never another season, well, this was still season 1. But David, I want to get your final thoughts first about the sort of what we saw in these 8 episodes, what's coming next, and just your general feeling about Ahsoka.
I enjoyed it. I would have liked to have seen 12 episodes. I feel like the plot armor problem happens when you have a shortened season, because you can't kill, let's say, Sabine. I've only seen her for a few episodes. If I'd seen her for 12 episodes, then maybe there's a chance, even if she doesn't, there's more of a reality that she might die, because you gave her 11 episodes, right? I'm looking forward to the next season, because now I know what's going on.
Yeah.
Right. The only thing I would have done differently, I think, obviously there's a lot we've talked about. I would have added a good character that died. Right. Morgan
That's
Elsbeth
fair.
died. I would have had a new character introduced, or maybe a Rebels character that was tertiary. Someone needed to die on the good guy side, and not the turtle people. Somebody needed to die to show some reality in the show. The same way, like, is it Paz Vizsla? Which Vizsla died?
Yeah, it's Paz.
Right, the one with the machine gun. Right, he died. Sometimes the good guys die, and I think in this episode there weren't enough good guys for anyone to die, because you only had like 3 or 4 of them, and I think you needed somebody else to take the bullet, the laser, to die, just to show you that, like, they don't have plot armor. That's what I found was missing as far as the good guys. Someone needed to bite it.
Daniel echoes what you're saying, that his continuous problem with the Disney Plus shows, not just Star Wars, 6 episodes is too little for any story to work in live action. I agree. I would like a little bit more. I think that these shows would be hurt by the old 22 episode model, but 10, you feel like, okay, it's a little bit better. 12 would be great, but I don't know. But at the same time, let's remember how great that season of Andor was, but knowing that there's going to be more, you know what I mean? So anything that stands alone, they should give us a little bit more time. Ryan, sort of same question to you as we wind down. As you think back on the show and think ahead about what's next, where's your head at with all this, Ryan?
Yeah, I think it was an exciting show to watch week to week. I think there's a lot of. I think I love the big swings this show took. I loved the World Between Worlds live action introduction. I loved that Hayden Christensen was in the show. I loved exploring a new galaxy. That was all very exciting to me. Also incorporating witchcraft, the zombie troopers I thought were fun, like stuff like that. There were a lot of new ideas and new things that, or maybe they've appeared in like other content or shows or comics or books, but to see it on screen and that stuff really excited me. I just think the writing, it really is the writing, like, first and foremost, just after, and especially after a show like Andor. And I get it, not every show is going to be like Andor, but like it really needed another pass. I think it was an awkward place for the show to start, and this feels like a show that's going to be required viewing to understand a lot of other stuff that's going to come out in the future, and I think it might be um, a tricky route for some folks to kind of get through this and maybe not bail early, but there was no clear. I also think there just has to be a clear thing that the show's about for if there's a season two. Uh, a lot of convenient writing around, but it didn't make up for. There's a lot of great moments throughout, and so I still had a good time. I'm still all in. I'm still very excited to see what they do with Thrawn. I'm curious if Ahsoka's gonna be trapped in this other galaxy for a really long time, or if they'll be able to harness those whales again and go back. But
Yeah.
I think the one other thing we didn't really touch on was the Ahsoka Tano Sabine Wren relationship.
Sure.
Unf-
Yeah, it's a
a-
great point.
Another that was just a thing that like the whole first half of the season relied on, and unfortunately, I just did not think those performers had the best chemistry. Um, and that was also a big leap for me because, or sorry, a big hurdle for me. I had a hard time kind of caring about the two of them when it just did not feel like they were on the same page
Which,
as performance.
had a similar story happen with the animated versions of these characters, you probably it would have been easier for you to be invested. I mean, it's very hypothetical, but you feel like it was really the on-screen chemistry, the performance
Yeah,
between the two of them.
I don't know if it's an acting thing or a directing thing, or even if it's the writing. I think it's all three, really. But that was just a hard pill to swallow,
Yeah.
trying to
And
care about these two main characters when I just did not. I didn't buy their prior relationship. I didn't. It just wasn't all there for me. And I think it's gonna. They really are. After Ahsoka Reborn is now like Ahsoka the White, like
right.
for the rest of the show. I was excited to see them back together, but yeah, and a lot of that I think is coming from Dave Filoni, as brilliant as he is. Like he's not absolved of criticism. He's an animation director, and he's still kind of getting his chops in live action. I think he's definitely improved as like a live action storyteller, but he's not fully there yet. So I think that's kind of my I'm in. I'm
Yeah,
cautiously optimistic.
and to give him credit, being partnered with John Favreau, obviously, with The Mandalorian, I think goes a long way to sort of, being able to see
This
the transition.
this show was lacking. I think it was missing a Favreau element to me.
That's fair. Yeah.
That I think's in The Mandalorian,
But
and even
it's not there.
yeah.
We were talking about Sabine, and one of the few names that I didn't say, that actress's name is Natasha Lou Bordizzo, and I saw her speaking on a red carpet, and of course she's British. Everybody's British. You know, I'm just like, from these shows that I watch, I'm like, oh, I had no idea. So, yeah, I think that she had the look down, but I didn't really feel that about the chemistry. But as you're saying it, some of those scenes didn't work as well as they could have, had they been different characters that we had seen previously in Star Wars. But
Can you,
hopefully
Ryan?
we get let me just say, hopefully we
Good.
get another season to see them work together and have it grow. What were you going to say, David?
I was just going to ask Ryan if the live action Sabine was like the cartoon Sabine. Honestly, obviously she's older, but my problem with their chemistry is that Ahsoka was very serious and morbid and did the arm folding thing. Like her arms were folded all the time. All the time. She walked around with her arms folded
Yeah.
like a teenage girl in a mall. Right? She was just grumpy. and Sabine, the dynamic between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and they were sort of on the same page. Ahsoka was very serious and your life depends on it. And Sabine was like giddy 14-year-old girl who didn't take anything seriously. And I didn't think they connected. She wasn't into it. And there was just a disconnect. It was like older sister, younger sister who didn't want to hear what her older sister had to say. And plus the fact that they didn't even have a relationship in the cartoon, and she's not even force sensitive, and
Yeah.
she's not really good at it. But then she held her own against Shin, who actually is trained. The whole
Right.
character didn't work for me. So I'm glad that you brought it up.
It's tough. It's tough. I mean, the question of was she similar to the cartoon? It's different because I think there's a good like 6-7 years between the series, and like she's kind of grown up and Ahsoka's at a different stage, and so
Yeah.
there's a bunch of I guess they are similar. It's just they've taken into account that like they're older and a little more mature. But yeah, when Sabine's like this universe's equivalent of what like Punk is, I was kind of
Yes.
hoping
Perfect
there was.
explanation. Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping for a little more. I don't know. I just never really bought. I mean, like this is again, we're going a little long. They tee up her learning to use the Force early. And there's several sequences where it's like, I'm going to try to get something, it doesn't work. Try to get something, it doesn't work. And we're kind of just primed of like, eventually it's going to work and there's
Yeah.
going to be a moment. And okay, she force pulls, I think, the saber or something
Yes.
like that. I so didn't buy her immediately being able to force push one of her like best friends, like someone that she considers as a brother, and risk his life to like get onto that ship. That was a bridge too far for me. Like
Yeah.
very shortly after you just
Yeah.
pulled for the first
Yeah.
time.
It was
I
like
don't know.
Ray becoming a saber master. It was like, what's
I think
his
it's
name?
worse than that.
It's not as easy to
It is
believe
worse, yeah.
as Luke upside down in Hoth. He can't quite reach the lightsaber. He closes it only moves like 2 feet. You can buy that. You know, at that point, his training's almost non-existent. But yeah, he could get it. He could get a lightsaber to jump in his hand. But yeah, I agree. This was like skipping a few steps. And yeah, I think that maybe some of it just some of the character development didn't feel earned, and maybe that's the biggest criticism for people who had even less to work with for some of these characters. Like David sort of talking about finding them for the first time. But well, I do hope that there's more before too long, and we get another chance to talk about it. But for now, I think we covered as much as I was hoping we would, and a little bit more. But I want to give you guys a chance to let people know where, should they want to continue the conversation, or if they've enjoyed you, David Brody, where can they find you?
Oh, well, if you did enjoy me, you could find me on all social media at David Brody, Brody. And you can find me on the Brooklyn Boys podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. It's two guys from Brooklyn talking about life with a real attitude. But
Right.
we're funny. We try to be funny. I think
Try to be
we've been
funny.
successful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Ryan, I
Yeah.
know that over the years you've popped up in a lot of places, and I appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today.
Oh my God, of course.
There was, like I said, there was nobody that I wanted to talk about Ahsoka with more than you, because I know your familiarity with the character and the animated series and all that. But I also I always enjoy your company, and I know that it's harder to do than it used to be when we were in the same building for hours and hours out of the week. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that. But if people want to find you, where could they look for you, Ryan?
I'm on Twitter, X, whatever, at Ryan Nilsen, RYNILSEN, on Instagram at Ryan Nilsen _.
Yes, I know. Unfortunately, you have to,
Yeah, I know.
our buddy
First time
Kevin
I'd
would tell
said
you
that.
need to be consistent in both places, but
Right.
sometimes it's out of your hands. But I will leave you on sentiment that David and I don't share. But earlier, Larry in the chat, you can see his
I was waiting for him.
avatar. There's the Philly fanatic.
Do I have anything
Go
nearby?
Phillies. And over the past week, it was very easy to root for the Phillies against the Atlanta Braves.
Oh my God.
Yes.
That's very easy to do. David and I, we were part of, there were 5 of us total who did a MLB playoff preview, and we were way off. Way. Now, I did pick the Astros to win the World Series, so it could still happen.
I think I did too. So that,
Yeah.
everything else
So we kind of hedged our bets a little bit.
All right, I gotta get out of here.
But I thought
No
that they were
stakes.
going to beat. I thought they were going to beat the Dodgers. So obviously, what did I know? You know what I mean? So
Where'd you have the Phillies?
I think I had them losing to the Dodgers in the NLCS. I had them, yeah. Well, but it's the Diamondbacks. Come on,
Oh my God.
it's I'll let people know behind the curtain after the game where the Braves were eliminated. I did text Ryan and I go, because we live in LA. I'm like, it's only a 5-hour drive to Phoenix,
I know,
right?
and now I
And
might
he's
be
like,
there on
damn
Saturday.
it, you're going to cost me a lot of money, aren't you? I'm like,
Yeah.
good. I hope so.
I might need to drive out there.
Yeah.
Shit.
It's an interesting place. I've seen games there, and they almost never play with the roof open because it makes it a hitter's ballpark. So yeah, but who knows? Anyway, I know people that tune into our Ahsoka show didn't want to hear any baseball talk. That's why I saved it for the end.
There you go.
But
So now let's talk politics.
Yeah, right, exactly. Perfect timing. But Ryan, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And David, thanks for staying up late with us. And all that happened was that you had to focus on us and not the Giants Bills game on Sunday.
That's
night.
okay. I'm going to go watch Daryl Dixon now, so it's all good.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So if you want to see any more of me, obviously this is my channel, Bladtcast, Bladtcast. You can find the audio version wherever your podcasts are found. I do a show called Marvel Movie Talk, which might sound very similar to another show that Ryan might remember. But
Yes.
we do that for the Geekscape Network. And David was on last week. He'll be on again this week. We're doing a weekly wrap up of Loki Fridays at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. And also at that same time on Tuesdays, I do a show called Who Are These Broadcasters, which can be found on the Who Are These Podcast Network. I'm on X and Instagram at ChristianDMZ.
Doesn't
So
sound
please
right.
find me over there. I know it really doesn't. I still like to call it.
Does not sound right.
That
Twitter.
explains your upbeat personality. Being on X.
Exactly. So with all that being said, thank both of you. Thank everybody in the chat. Appreciate seeing some familiar faces. That is all the time we have for now. I believe our next episode, I'm going to have a gentleman who some people know. He goes by Carlos Danger, which you can look up that name. We are going to, in the honor of Halloween, we are not going to review the classic Texas Chainsaw Massacre or any of the varying degree of sequels that followed. We're going to look at the Netflix Texas Chainsaw Massacre from last year, which the word massacre is right there in the title. And well, it's fitting. So join us for that next time on episode 565 of the Bladtcast, which just sounds so crazy when I say it out loud. But that's not this time on the Bladtcast. That'll be next time on